All right, this is Chris Grits Comments. Welcome back. A little bit of stuff that really shouldn't go without saying that this is about common sense on common ground. We had suicide bombers enter Kabul airport through the Taliban defenses. And I say that because when the two suicide bombers hit Kabul airport, at first nobody could figure out how they did that. Earlier this morning, it's August 27th, 2021. It turns out they entered through the Taliban side of the defenses. And what that means is that we got France, we got Germany, we got England, and then we have us, and then we have actual Taliban government pitching in together, surrounding the airport, allowing people in and all this good stuff. But we had those on the Taliban side, the Taliban government side, letting in two suicide bombers to cause a lot of damage. Now, what this says is that the Taliban government is either weak as all hell, and they're not the terroristic threat that everybody's proclaiming them to be, or they're a part of the plot. Now, I'm going with both, given the fact that they've been bitch slapped for 20 years. You know, we hadn't had a single airplane crash. We hadn't had a single boat or train sabotage, you know, since the time that we've been beating them up. And as part of the plot, yeah, they turned the other cheek. They probably got paid pretty good cash. They probably got promised some real good opium. They probably got promised some real good slaves. And I say that because there's a lot of people that are there's a lot of the Taliban who are not letting people escape, not letting them evacuate. There are people that are in hiding while their houses are being searched by the Taliban, who are rummaging through everything, stealing documentations, passports, identification, medical records, you name it, anything that can prove some kind of ID, and then leaving notes behind saying, "We're coming back for you later." You know, it's a plot. It's a plot. That is a 100% plan to keep, own, enslave, and do whatever you want with your captives, and in the name of Allah or whatever you name God, through this hate organization. And this is just proof that they're either a weak government who's letting the Taliban do these things, or it's part of the plot. And I'm going with both. It's only right. It only makes sense. It's only common sense. Over here in Texas, the Texas House of Representatives passed a bill on voter restrictions. Now, I've posted this stuff before on this channel before I got grounded, after I got grounded, restricted, or whatever. And I'm going to go into a little bit more depth on my podcast off of Anchor, Chris's Comments on Anchor.fm. For right now, it's just another BS attempt to try to pass voter restrictions. And a lot of people are saying, well, how is making sure everybody has their identification voter restriction when it's about voter fraud? Well, truth be told, there isn't anything wrong with that. That's not what the complaint is about, though. The complaint is about voting booths being closed in certain locations, mostly where non-whites live, non-white communities are. Closing ballot boxes, once again, where non-white communities dominate. Don't get me wrong, there's a couple of them where they actually do dominate, but, don't say but, however, they're in areas with very little to no, voter electoral votes. There's also the removal of the early hours. There's a couple of places that they used to permit 24-hour voting and early days. Those have all been removed. And that is the voter restrictions that all of us with common sense, our common ground, who can clearly see this, is voter suppression. You know, this is what we call BS. So for right now, with the Dems over in Washington, D.C., the House of Representatives here in Texas passed the voter restrictions bill. It might be upheld, it might not be, who knows. But the point is that the attempt was made. Ergo, everybody that is in favor of it, in particularly the constituents and voters, will be keeping those that voted yes for this in power by way of the vote, ironically enough. So we're going to see how that turns out come the next election. The U.S. Supreme Court ends Biden's federal moratorium. Okay, this is the thing that keeps all the landlords from evicting people who are, who wound up suffering through this pandemic. Joblessness, sickness, stays away, and quarantines and sanctuaries. And the one bill that is supposed to protect them from being evicted, as well as keeping the landlords from having to face any kind of outrageous fines, has been ended by the Supreme Court. Now, there's a catch to that. In reference to the jobless and jobless people and the landlords. In order to get this bill to be upheld, some way, somehow, the bill has to be paid for. Somebody's got to fit the bill. And in this case, it just wasn't clarified as to where the money was going to go to uphold this policy. So nobody signed it, nobody wrote into it, nobody met any court agreements, nobody filled out any apps or requests and all this good stuff the way they're supposed to when dealing with something that involves the courts. Anything that involves the courts, you have a form to fill out, you have the request to be made, you have to do that personally, you have to have a lawyer or a representative, you have to have all that stuff being done to set the date, to meet up for the court, to state your claim, to review it, the case, and then to await the final judgment of the Supreme Courts or any courts based on what the judge says after reviewing all the facts. Everybody just sort of let all those responsibilities slide. They just sort of coasted on, carried on, didn't really speak up, didn't speak out. And so now the Supreme Court, who sees the policy that was supposed to end in October, now ending here in August. And what's concerning is that this, because follies like this happen a lot in the courts of law, but what is concerning is this, that it's being done during the second pandemic, during the variant in progress, while storms are approaching. And there's still a couple of storms approaching after the previous one that's already started to flood other areas and take a few lives. So that's a huge concern. You got a lot of people out there that are already homeless, but you got this threat coming up by way of nature, and there might be some heavy repercussions to it. It's only common sense to think this way. It only makes sense to focus on that and to think like this and wonder what in the world is going to happen. Now, the deadline is October 1st. So obviously it's a whole month and some change that the administration can focus on and write something up and come up with a solution. So my fingers are crossed. Now, today's subject I want to focus on is that dang Operation Lone Star bill. Earlier this week, Texas House Committee advanced a funding bill that would appropriate nearly $2 billion on border enforcement. Immigrant and Texas Department of Public Safety officials testified for 7 hours for this bill to pass. The bill, sponsored by Representative Greg Bonin, a Republican from Friendswood, would pay for prosecuting migrants for trespassing, building border barriers such as fencing, and dispatching state troopers to the border to arrest migrants. All right. This is so jacked up. Now, we've seen it coming, as I've stated through previous videos. The Operation Lone Star declaration that Abbott has produced. Okay, but there's a lot of stuff that left into questions up in the air as to how about he was going to carry it out, despite the fact that he left in specific details, some of those things being sending state troopers to arrest migrants. And as you've heard in some of my previous videos, that is a very bad idea. Okay, but the $2 billion is where I'm going with this, because as I've stated before, when it comes to politics, it's all about the money. Belief is the tool. Okay, it's all about the money. Belief is the tool. And you'll see what I'm talking about here. This $2 billion is probably going to be taken out of the Biden's infrastructure bill, out of the $550 billion in new spendings part of that bill. Now, obviously, that is not meant for a border wall. It's meant for communities. It's meant for churches. It's meant for any kind of organization that helps the people. Okay? Border wall, something that isn't even complete. It's never been complete. It's always been dug around, climbed over, sailboated around, flown over. It's just dumb. But here's Abbott looking, all of a sudden coming up with $2 billion right after the infrastructure bill has been paid, right after reconciliation bill plan has been approved. And now here's Abbott with $2 billion for the wall. Okay? And the immigration and DTPS, that's the Texas Department of Public Safety, those officials, they're all in on it. They're all in on it. They got their hands in the till somehow. And I say that because of something that I stated earlier. It's always about the money. It's always a problem. It's always too expensive in the complaints of these politicians until they can get their hands in the till. Okay? The money. Abbott obviously made it clear that he's going to do this through the Operation Lone Star declaration. Except most of it's going to be masked as fees and fines. And what I mean by that is that one of the things that he stated was the repairs and costs of trespassers that might have cut in some barbed wire to get through some land, jumped fences and all this other stuff, and supposedly destroyed farm and ranches. Okay, destroyed whole farms and ranches and stuff like that. So he's made this declaration that it's going to be about fees and repair costs, and Biden is going to pay for it, and blah 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 blah. Which, don't get me wrong, he's going to make those claims, and it's all going to be coming out of about $2 billion through the new spendings part of the Biden infrastructure bill. The new spendings is going to be $550 billion. So that's, $2 billion is something that he can more than likely get away with. So the money is one of the main things to look for here. The money concerning the organization's complaints, spendings. I've already stated about SWK Estrella having to rent out an old abandoned Walmart and set up partitions, not even partitions, but using old boxes as partitions to set for rooms for each individual migrant child, leaving them to lie on the floor in sleeping bags or on cots, not exactly official beds. Having something to eat, yeah, but carted in sandwiches and little fruit juices, something that is really not expensive at all, not even for 700 kids, feeding them only once a day, and restricting them and all this other stuff to use the bathroom. Now again, because the Walmart has 2 bathrooms in the front, 2 bathrooms in the back, obviously not enough for 700 kids in one old abandoned Walmart. But yeah, there was the Christian coalition that did that. Estrella, Southwest Key Estrella, they were the ones that were letting kids out and taking money as part of the deal from the cartels to get them in to the U.S. There wasn't any sponsors. There wasn't anything like that. They were just signing the permission slips, the release forms, and letting the kids out while collecting on the other end of that deal. You know, somebody was supposed to have gotten paid over there. They wound up paying Estrella, Southwest Key Estrella. Okay, same thing with the other 2 that I can't remember right now, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip that. But look for the money, look for the spendings, okay? Look at who's actually banking off of this crap. Millions and millions are going to that. And the best way to find out about that is the complaints. The complaints being the mistreatments of these migrants. Caging them, for example. Huge freaking warning sign. Huge freaking sign of obviousness. Spending money on cages. Handing over, inexpensive food once a day for them to eat. Yeah. The pinto beans lady is the or refried beans lady is a prime example of that. Came from El Salvador, I think, and was complaining about this Mexican food. This is something that poor Mexicans eat, and it was refried beans. She was complaining like that, so she got the title refried lady or refried bean lady, which was fine. I get it. El Salvador and all the other Latin countries, they have to distance themselves from Mexico, despite the fact that it's historically and archaeologically proven that they all came from Mexico, Mexica territory. But yeah, just listen to the complaints, look at the spendings, and you could see clear as day that Biden has taken $2 billion from the infrastructure bill, and more than likely is pocketing it and letting everybody else that's involved pocket whatever that's not being spent. Remember, they're throwing beans at them. They're throwing pinto beans at them. They're throwing little sandwiches at them. In rented out little spaces. Nobody's fitting the bill. Nobody's providing actual hospitality like the way the Biden administration's company is. So, just keep an eye out for that, okay? Oh yes, the state troopers. Okay. Authorized by Bonin, the representative from Friendswood. Can you believe this crap? Friendswood. Okay. He's doing that to authorize stuff for persecuting migrants and dispatching state troops to the border to arrest migrants. Okay, this is very clear that money is going to be given to him by way of prison numbers racket. Okay, he's getting all these people. He's authorizing state troopers to just arrest any old migrant and take them in and say, look what I'm doing. I'm doing so good. And while he's doing that, that legalizes him to collect however much he feels he needs for this to be paid for. And he's pocketing in the cash. You see what I'm saying? All right, I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to cut it short right here, and I'm just going to go to part 2, which hopefully I can get to in the second part. It's not a lot, but I'm throwing a whole lot of information on you when I should just keep as to the objective and the objections. So let me go ahead and get to the next. This is part 1. We're going to do part 2, and I'm just going to go through all of this in one full swing on my podcast right after this. So we'll see you in a bit.